All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA exam practice question series, where we're going through the next set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack and practice exams. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Anytime Miss Robinson uses a dependent group contingency in her classroom, she selects a person who is unlikely to complete the contingency requirement. If you were a behavior analyst giving advice to Miss Robinson on this intervention, what might you suggest to improve the dependent contingency? Couple different things here. First, you're going to be the behavior analyst in the scenario, and on the exam, you should always be viewing things through the lens of a behavior analyst. You're going to be giving advice to Miss Robinson, so you're collaborating Miss Robinson, and you want to improve the dependent contingency. And that's important because we're not looking for a different intervention or a change. We want to improve the current intervention. Currently, Ms. Robinson is using a dependent group contingency. A dependent contingency, or the hero contingency, is when we have a group and that whole group is reliant on one person or a small sample of that group to complete the contingency. Therefore, they all get reinforcement. So if you have 10 people, you give one person that responsibility. If that one person completes the requirement, the whole group gets reinforcement. Ms. Robinson, however, is selecting a person who is unlikely to complete the contingency. Now, why is that an issue? Well, one, there's already an ethical issue with dependent contingencies because they can lead to bullying and stigmatizing and ostracizing if the person can't meet the requirement. So if you're picking someone intentionally who's unlikely to meet the requirement, the odds of that person getting bullied or getting stigmatized or getting ostracized for not getting reinforcement for the group goes up. Two, you want your learners to meet contingencies because you want them to be reinforced. So this is a poor strategy. So how are you going to suggest this to Ms. Robinson in a collaborative way? A, continue implementing the intervention the way she is currently implementing it. Well, no. Yes, you're collaborating. Yes, you are respecting her as a practitioner, but what she's doing is incorrect. So you've got to figure out a way to explain that to her. B, suggest using an independent group contingency instead. Well, we don't want to do that because we want to improve the dependent. So you can't just say, well, do something different. We're focused on the dependent contingency here. C, recommend she select a person who is likely to meet the requirement. Yes, one, that's the most parsimonious explanation. Just pick somebody who's going to meet the requirement. Easy enough, right? Two, her intervention she chose can still be used. You're just giving the better way to do it. So C is collaborative and parsimonious. And then D, question whether she understands how group contingencies are supposed to work. Well, in a collaborative relationship, you should never take that approach where you're questioning either her skill or her judgment. That's not what we do as team members and collaborators. The best way to do this is to recommend she select a person who is likely to meet the requirement. Eric hosts a party for his employee at the end of each month to celebrate their achievements. After the party, Eric gathers feedback on employee satisfaction. Eric changes the meal he serves at the party every month for 4 months and then compares employee satisfaction across the 4 months. What type of analysis does this most resemble? So, analysis question. What is Eric doing? Eric is hosting a party for his employees at the end of each month to celebrate achievements. He's getting feedback on employee satisfaction as well. So he's empirically analyzing either the party or overall satisfaction. In addition, he's changing the meal he serves at the party every single month. So 1 month, let's say it's pizza, then he gets sandwiches, then he gets Greek food, then he gets sushi. So he's changing the meal each month. He then sees how does that different meal affect employee satisfaction. So what type of analysis does that resemble? A comparative analysis. What is a comparative analysis? Well, it's when you are comparing two separate interventions in ABA or two separate things, meaning they're not part of the same treatment package. They're not occurring at the same time. They're not having the same effect simultaneously. Eric is taking different meals for different months. So each meal is not part of the same treatment package, not part of the same thing. He's comparing each meal to one another. So A looks pretty good. What about B, a component analysis? Well, component analysis, you look at one intervention as a whole that's been effective, and then you look at each component of that intervention. So if you've got an intervention that's using reinforcement and extinction, a component analysis would be analyzing extinction and reinforcement separately. The big difference between comparative analysis and component analysis, with comparative analysis, what you're comparing is not part of one treatment package. They're separate. Here, the meals are all separate. They're not occurring simultaneously. Component analysis, you have one package where you're then analyzing each part that are occurring simultaneously. So that's the big difference between comparative and component. Parametric is when you take a single variable and you try to understand how much you need or the dosage of that variable, which Eric is not doing here. And then, of course, a functional analysis is not relevant here because we're not looking for functions. What Eric is doing is he's comparing each meal across all these different months. They're not part of one package. They're not occurring at the same time. He's comparing them against each other to see which one is most effective for employee satisfaction. A supervisor is aware of the fact that every time she supervises her technicians, they start to respond differently to their clients and they act different around stakeholders. The supervisor wants to change this because her supervision data is not accurate. What would be the best approach for the supervisor to take? So what's actually occurring here? What do we mean by the best approach for the supervisor? Well, what we're describing is reactivity. The supervisor knows that every time she supervises her technicians, they respond differently to the clients and they act different around stakeholders. So her presence is affecting how the technicians are acting. Therefore, the supervision data is inaccurate because she's not getting a real true picture of how the technicians respond to stakeholders and how they respond to the client and behavior. The supervisor here needs to limit the reactivity. How can she do that? How can the supervisor limit reactivity? A, the supervisor should find a way to be less obtrusive in her observation. Yes, absolutely. Reactivity typically occurs when the presence of the stimulus, in this case, the supervisor, is very obtrusive. She's got to figure out a way to make herself less obtrusive. Now, B, the supervisor should supervise technicians in secret, is absolutely not the right way to go about it. You should never secretly supervise technicians or personnel. That's just unethical in many different ways. So B, even though, yes, it would reduce reactivity, is definitely not the ethical way to go about it. C, the supervisor should punish the technicians for poor treatment fidelity. Well, no, reactivity we know occurs, right? The technicians can't control the reactivity. The supervisor has to do a better job of being less obtrusive. And then D, the supervisor should no longer supervise these technicians. Well, of course not. She has to supervise them. So what are ways she can be less obtrusive? Well, if she's hard on the technicians or the feedback is different, she can change her feedback. She can change the way she reacts to technicians or how she acts around technicians. There's a lot of different things she can do with her own behavior to make herself less obtrusive. She can also remove herself from the situation where she just sits back and doesn't say anything or do anything and just observes. There are ways around that, but the bottom line is reactivity is occurring with her supervisees. The data is not accurate. She has to do something different in her own behavior and the way she supervises. A dad is building Lego cars with his son. He wants to teach his son to identify different pieces. Whenever he wants his son to grab a certain piece, he will say, pick up the flat piece, and then move that piece closer to the son. What is the father doing? All right. Looking at the father's behavior, he's building Lego cars. He's teaching his son to identify pieces. Whenever he wants his son to grab a piece, what does he do? He says, pick up the flat piece, the instruction, and then he prompts. He moves that piece closer to the son. So immediately we know he's prompting. So A, a positional prompt, yes. SD, pick up the flat piece, slides the piece closer. He's positionally prompting the piece. What is he doing more broadly? Well, is he doing a stimulus prompt or a response prompt? A stimulus prompt acts directly on the relevant stimuli. A response prompt acts directly on the response. In this case, he's manipulating the stimulus by moving that piece closer So yes, it's a positional prompt, but it's also a stimulus prompt. He's acting directly on the stimulus. What about incidental teaching? Incidental teaching is just like naturalistic teaching. He's using naturally occurring situations to teach, and it's exactly what he's doing, right? He's building cars with his son. When it comes up that he needs a certain piece, that's when he teaches. So he's using these incidents that are naturally occurring to teach the son. So the father's using a positional prompt. He's using a stimulus prompt. He's incidentally teaching. So he's doing D, all the above. My daughter has a stuffed frog in her crib. Each morning we say, "Good morning, frog." Today, while reading a book, I point at a picture of a frog and say, "Frog." Given these two variables and this information, what aspect of stimulus equivalence is best represented here? All right, stimulus equivalence, reflexivity, symmetry, transitivity, right? Concept formation, matching to sample. Difficult concept, one you've got to know, one that once you learn it becomes much simpler. Now, the question says, given these variables and this information, what is best represented? Meaning, we might have incomplete information. We might have an incomplete idea of what's going on. We still have to pick our best answer. And it's related to stimulus equivalence. So we're going to be thinking reflexivity, symmetry, or transitivity. Now, the daughter has a stuffed frog in her crib. Each morning we say, "Good morning, frog." So let's say frog in the crib is A. Okay, for stimulus equivalence, let's label our aspects. And so we know the stuffed frog in the crib is a frog because we say "Good morning, frog." So stuffed frog is A. Today, while reading a book, I point out a picture of a frog and say frog. So the picture is going to be B. And now, given that we have A and B, even though we have incomplete information and we're not sure if the daughter can say that the picture of the frog and the stuffed frog match, we have A, we have B. So we have these two different variables. So when A equals B and B equals A, is that reflexivity? Well, reflexivity is A equals A. That's identical matching to sample. What we're more looking at here is symmetry. And again, incomplete information. All we know is we have a stuffed frog and a picture of a frog, which is A and which is B, and they equal each other. So A equals B, which is symmetry. Transitivity is A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C, and it's a derived response. We don't have those three levels, so we don't have transitivity. Reactivity, which we just talked about, not what's relevant here. We're talking stimulus equivalence. So the best answer here is symmetry, because you have the stuffed frog and you have the picture of a frog. A equals B, B equals A. Working with incomplete information, that's our best answer. Which of the following verbal operants should be the least likely to produce a generalized conditioned reinforcer? So we can either start with verbal operant or generalized conditioned reinforcer. Let's start with verbal operant. A verbal operant is our verbal behavior, text, echoics, commands, interverbals, transcriptions, textuals, autoclitics, these type of things. 4 verbal operants on the exam. You've got to know what evokes the operants, what reinforces the operants, what they produce, and then point-to-point and formal similarity. Question here is asking, what do each of these verbal operants produce? And what is least likely to produce a generalized condition reinforcer? And a generalized condition reinforcer is what? A generalized condition reinforcer is a reinforcer that can be used for a variety of behaviors in a variety of situations, typically something like praise or money. You can use praise and money to reinforce a lot of different things. Now, let's look at our verbal operant and ask ourselves, which operants are going to likely produce generalized reinforcers? A, tax. What's a tact? A tact is a label evoked by a nonverbal stimulus. So let's say you see a truck drive by, you say truck. That's likely to produce a generalized condition reinforcer. Think about when you're teaching tacting and you teach a learner to tact ball. They say ball, you say, "Oh, great job." You praise GCR. What about an echoic? An echoic is when they copy what you're saying. So if I say bubbles and the learner say bubbles, I'll say, "Oh, good job." I'm praising echoics evoked by verbal SD, point-to-point formal similarity, likely to produce GCRs. What about mands? What are mands likely to produce? And what should mands produce? Well, mands are evoked by motivating operations. Mands are request. And a mand, when a mand is exhibited, and if you're teaching a mand, the mand should produce whatever was requested. Meaning, if I manned for something, that reinforcement should be me getting what I manned for, not necessarily a GCR. What about an interverbal? An interverbal is a conversation or answering a question. If you say row, row, and the learner says row your boat, you're going to say great job. Again, praise. You've got to think, if I was teaching each one of these, what would I reinforce with? A, B, and D, likely you're going to receive some sort of praise or token. A mand, if you're mand training, should receive whatever which was requested. So the least likely to produce the GCR, the generalized condition reinforcer, is C, mands. Thank you for watching. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack and practice exams. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Subscribe if you haven't already. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.